sir, could you speak a bit about software knowledge documentation slash preservation? It is a big issue in 2024. So, how are you looking at it, and how is your company looking into it?
Yeah, great question. This, by the way, this lack of software documentation and preserving the knowledge is not something 2024. It is historical issue. This goes back to the core philosophy of the software engineers, the culture that an organization builds. How do you really enable these practices to be embedded right from the beginning? Most occasions what happens is that there is something concept of autonomy, the engineers, developers autonomy, that they can do what they want to do and develop a high quality software. In that process, and the culture which is built up where, for example, I have everybody around me, I can talk to them each other together and then transfer the knowledge. But the most important thing here is that what they miss is what happens tomorrow when I don't exist. What happens when somebody else has to do this who are not part of this circle, and what happens to them. And this is where we get into the problem of like not having enough knowledge base, repository, documentation, and that too detailed documentation. We are no we are no different. We do have navigating that problems. We have come out of that in a great way, especially when we did the transitions of several of the technology teams in India. During that time, our teams went on documenting it exhaustively and further continuously maintaining the documentations. But this is a perennial problem. It all boils down to the culture. How is your engineering culture? What you really enforce it right from beginning, sprint after sprint. Do you make a provision for the engineers to make the documentation rather than saying that okay, you develop it and then go to the next sprint and then sometime we will look at retrospective, like now this question say, oh, do we have a documentation, do we have the knowledge, what happened? Most important here is to see that it has to be a practice, it has to be a culture. That is what it will determine whether you can be successful in preserving it or not.
Right. My second question is, green software is something that is on a lot of companies' minds. All right. So, what is the next step when it comes to green software, and how is your company actually looking into it?
Green software, currently, if I talk about it, it boils down to the, if I'm correct, you're referring to the carbon footprint that each softwares are generating it. Ultimately, what happens is that where do you run your software? Where are you running? And it runs in some data center, whether it is owned by us or somebody we host on somebody's cloud provider or wherever it runs. But the most important here is that how effective and efficient is this software which are run? How much of power that it takes? Is your softwares are really power hungry? And how you can make it a more microservices architecture, serverless architecture, which takes away the power, native power, and it scales up based on the demand rather than you have a fixed demand for all your softwares. You have earlier days like you had a server, a number of CPUs and RAM, and irrespective of how much you consume, you would run the whole machine and that you burn the carbon. Now the things changes like okay, I run and I consume the service infrastructure based on what I require the computing power rather than having everything running all the time. And that is what is changing the game today. Clean, when you say talk about green software, this is what comes to picture. Build the scalability, build the architecture so versatile and agile enough that it scales up based on the demand and the volume rather than you build a capacity and wait for somebody to come and consume it. That is where the consumption really makes a big difference. One is that it is environmental contribution, reducing the carbon footprint. Most important is that financially, economically, it makes sense for the business. You know when to scale up depending on your business volume, situations, kind of peak season, lean season, and things like that. At the same time, you know when you don't have to burn the things and bring it down.